We are up to Perek Chav Zayin. If you remember, David, while Shaul was sleeping, took his spear and his water jug, and when Shaul realized that David could have killed him and did not, so Shaul basically said he would never hurt David again. But frankly, David did not believe him. David felt in danger, and Perek Chav Zayin begins with that fear that David still has, and rightfully so. Vayomer David alibo, David says to himself, even with all of this language of reconciliation, Ata esafeh yom echad biad Shaul may kill me any day. Ein li toiv ki imalet el eretz pelishtim. V'noash mimeni Shaul uvaksheni od b'chol gavul Yisrael. V'nimladati miyadai. So here, David has a very strange strategy. David says, I'm not safe in Eretz Yisrael. My fellow Jews may turn me in. Shaul may find me. The safest place for me to go would be the land of the Philistines. Of course, these are the enemies of Am Yisrael. And the idea would be, I could portray myself as somebody who rejects Shaul, and I am now a traitor, and I could convince the king of the Philistines that I'll work for them, and they'll be happy to have me. I'll be a defector. I will be a hero of the Jews that has gone over to the other side, and perhaps they'll be safe. Now you'll remember, David had gone over before, surreptitiously, and when he was caught, he had to pretend that he was crazy, and then they let him go. This is a different strategy. Instead of portraying himself as crazy, he will openly say to the king of Gas, the king of the Philistines, that I am defecting to your side. And he figures they would be happy to have him. Of course, it's a risk. They might have killed him on the spot. Vayakam David, vayavarhu b'shesh me'osish asher imo. David and the 600 people that are with him, they went to Achish ben Ma'uch, Melech Gas, the king of Gas, which was a major Philistine city on the Mediterranean coast. Vayeshev David im Achish bagas hu v'anashav ishu beso. And David dwelt with Achash, together with David's men. Ishu beso, they brought over their families. David ushtei nashav, David and his two wives, Achinoam Yisraelis, and Abigail, who had been the wife of Ashes Naval from Carmel. Vayugad l'Shaul ki barach David Gas. When Shaul heard that David is not even in Eretz Yisrael, he went over to the Philistines. So there's no point in trying to look for him. He won't be able to find him. Lo yasaf oid levaksha. He stopped seeking him. Vayomer David. So now David is living in Philistine territory. So the first thing he wants to do is create a certain separation, both for ruchnius reasons, so he should be less affected by the tumah of the Pelishtim, and for military reasons, that Achish shouldn't really know what David is doing. David is going to kind of be a double agent. The Pelishtim are thinking he's working against Am Yisrael, when in point of fact he is working for Am Yisrael, but he doesn't want Achish to know what he's doing, and this will be explained. Vayomer David el Achash, imna matzasi chen b'einecha. If I have found favor in your eyes, yitnu li makom b'achas me'ari asada. Give me a city in the outlying areas, a little village. Eish v'sham, I will live there. I don't need the prominence, I don't need the kavod of being in the capital city. Lama yeshev avdecha be'ir hamamlacha imach. Why should I be in the royal capital with you? People might look at me as a king. I don't want the kavod. Put me out in the sticks. Vayitein loy Achish b'yemahu es Tziklag. And Achish gave David the town of Tziklag in Philistine territory. And the book of Shmuel records a very interesting point, that although there were shetachim of Eretz Pelishtim that were never conquered, in the middle of that Philistine territory, the Jewish people had the town of Tziklag. It was a royal town, kind of like West Berlin in the middle of East Germany in the olden days. And therefore it is recorded, L'chein haisa Tziklag l'malchei Yehuda ad hayom hazeh. meaning the whole duration of the Malchus Beis David. So this must have been added later, maybe with the Anshe Knesset Agdola. This was not originally in there. That Siklag became a territory that was owned by the kings of Malchei Beis David. Vayehi mispar hayamim asher yashav David b'stei Pelishtim yamim v'arba chadashim. David dwelt with Achash in the land of the Philistines 4 months and 2 days. And again, we'll see why he went back. And what did David do in those 4 months? Vayal David v'anashav vayifshetu es hageshuri v'hagirzi hamaleki. David would plunder foreign nations, such as the Geshuri and the Girzi. Now, these are foreign nations who lived in parts of Canaan, but they were not the 7 nations that we exterminate, but David would take their rechush, because they really didn't belong there. And he would also take the Shalal of Amalek. This is actually a little bit of a problem, because the Shalal of Amalek is supposed to be destroyed. So how could you take them? But it does mention here that the Shalal was taken. Kihine Yoshvo Sa'aretz. These nations were still inhabiting Eretz Yisrael, even in the time of Shaul, Asher me Olam Boach Ashura Vad Eretz Mitzrayim. And they were living in the southern part of the country on the way to Shur. Shur was a southern city, on the way to Mitzrayim. In other words, this is the southern border of Eretz Yisrael. Vihika David Esaretz, and David smote these nations. V'lo yachaya ish v'isha, and he did not leave alive a man or a woman. V'lakach tzon ubakor, and he took the sheep and the cattle, the chamorim, the gemalim, begadim, the camels, clothing. V'yashav v'yavo Achash, and he returned it to Achash. He gave all of this to Achash. So Achash knows that David is working on his behalf. Vayayimer Achish, and when Achish would ask him, Al Pashadatem, where did you get this plunder today? So David made up a story. Oh, I attacked Jewish villages along the boundary, and I got this from the Jews. In other words, the concept was he wanted Achish to be confident in his loyalty, and that he has become a defector or a traitor against the people, because that's the only way he'll be safe. In reality, David was destroying the enemies of the Jews. But since there were no survivors, nobody could go back and correct Achish's misimpression. So David is telling Achish, I am doing this to Jewish settlements, when in fact he was actually working on behalf of the Jews. David said, I went to the Negev of Yehuda, the southern part of Yehuda. Negev of Yerachmeeli, the family of Yerachmiel. Again, this is a subclan of Shevet Yehuda. Negev HaKeni. Keni are Bnei Yisrael, who were not necessarily Jewish, but they were welcome in Klal Yisrael. Ve'ish ve'isha lo yechaya David. But there was not a single man or woman in the areas that David attacked that were kept alive. Lahavi Gas Lemor, who could come back to Gas, Pen Yagidu Leinu Lemer, because maybe they'll tell the king, Ko Asa David Mishpato, Kol Yamim, Asher Yoshev B'Shar B'Stei HaPlishtim. And this is what David did for those 4 months. He was actually helping the Jewish people by eradicating their enemies. When the story he gave to Achish was, I am fighting against Am Yisrael. And the parak ends, V'yamein Achish b'David Lemor. And Achish had faith in David. Havesh hivish b'yamo b'Yisrael. He has become disgusted with his nation Israel. V'haya li eved olam. And he will be my servant forever. So essentially, through this ruse, David purchased, so to speak, the loyalty of Achish.